St Teresa of Kolkata had a significant life experience whilst in India, which altered the rest of her life as well as the lives of those around her. To begin with, we will examine some of the major points in her life. St Teresa was born on the 26th of August 1910. She was born in Skopje, which is part of modern-day Macedonia. Her parents were of Albanian descent. When she was around 9 years old, her father died, who, along with her mother, were a great influence on her and instilled a spirit of hospitality in her. When she was 12 years old, she first recognized a calling to religious life, and then when she turned 18, she applied to the Institute of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Loreto Sisters, to become a nun, specifically a missionary. She knew how to speak Albanian, Serbo-Croatian, and a little bit of French, but no English at all. So naturally, she was sent to Ireland to join the sisters there at the Mother House of the Order to begin her training. After 6 weeks of learning English, she was off again, this time to India. The sea voyage lasted 7 weeks and found them finally arriving in Chennai, but at the time was called Madras. This was her first experience of extreme poverty, and it immediately struck her. A little amount of time was spent travelling, eventually to Kolkata, and then off to Darjeeling to the novitiate house for an intense period of training in spirituality and the charism of the IBVM. At the end of her novitiate year in 1931, she made her first vows and adopted the name Teresa as a professed name, modelled after St Teresa of Lisieux, the Little Flower. She was sent to Kolkata and worked at the Loreto school there. In her time in this area, she was invited to teach at a number of schools, including the Loreto School, St Mary's School for Girls, as well as St Teresa's Bengali School. By now she was fluent in English, Bengali and Hindi, and in 1937 she professed her final vows to be a sister of Loreto for life. As time went on, she became the headmistress of St Mary's and became keenly aware of the poverty surrounding her, particularly with the advent of World War II. During her time working in 1942, she made a special vow on top of her regular vows. This secret vow, made with the permission of her spiritual director, was between her and Jesus not to refuse him anything. Time passed, and eventually in the course of religious life, she was to attend her annual retreat in Darjeeling, when on the 10th of September 1946 she had a decisive, mystical encounter with Jesus Christ. He called her to give up everything she had and to serve him in the poorest of the poor. By no means were the people that she was serving rich, far from it, but now she was called by Jesus to leave the order that she dearly loved and serve the outcast and abandoned. This call was the next phase of her life and took her beyond Loreto Sisters to start a new congregation. But she made a vow for life to the sisters, and getting out of that is not easy. Nearly 2 full years pass, agonizingly slow for her, in which her obedience and commitment were tested. She worked closely with her spiritual director, Father Van Exum, who enforced a year of waiting, and was allowed to contact the bishop, Archbishop Peria, and tell him of her new calling. Eventually, she was allowed to apply for an indult of exclaustration, which permits her to work outside of the Loreto Sisters for a time to discern her calling. In 1948, almost 2 full years after her train journey, she leaves the convent in August, and after basic medical training, began working in the slums in December wearing a simple blue and white sari. The work is difficult and she has nothing to give those she cared for except her love. Things continued, and in 1949 a former student of hers asked to join her in the work, before more came to add to the group. In 1950, the Archbishop assisted St Teresa in applying for her group of women to be considered an official religious order, and October 7, 1950, Pope Pius XII pronounced them a religious congregation of diocesan right, the Missionary Sisters of Charity. From there, the congregation grew, serving more of the poorest of the poor and setting up orphanages, as well as homes for the dying, such as Nirma Hirade, where the destitute were cared for and loved in the final moments of life. This was their vocation, to serve Christ found in the poorest of the poor. Over time, the Missionary Sisters of Charity grew, and in 1965, Pope Paul VI declared the order a religious congregation of pontifical right, with St. Teresa as the superior of the order. The order spreads and documentaries are made about her life. She receives the Nobel Peace Prize for her work amongst other awards, but all the while she maintains a simple devotion to Jesus Christ and prays humbly and quietly at the back of the chapel each morning for an hour of adoration before working with the poorest of the poor. Her goal? To satisfy the thirst of Christ dying on the cross, found in the distressing skies of the poor. St Teresa died on the 5th of September in 1997, having left a legacy of now more than 5,000 religious sisters working in 139 countries, alongside a further 400 brothers and 35 priests. St Teresa was canonized in 2016 by Pope Francis.